Rachelle Deans is coming in from Riverton, that beautiful Riviera of the South. Rachelle, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm okay, but how have you been? What's been happening with you?
Well, I had my first and only injection on the 8th of August. So I was going to work that out. It must be something like 18 or 19 weeks ago now. And when I had the injection, as soon as I had it, as soon as it went in my arm, I felt really, really strange. I felt like I was drunk. My husband was there at the same time, Shane, and he also got his first one. And as he was leaving, he was talking to the nurse. They walked ahead of me, and I walked down the corridor to the waiting room, and I felt like I was wobbling backwards and forwards as I was going. When we sat down, he said to me, "Are you okay?" I said, "No, I don't feel right." And a nurse came over and said, "Are you all both good?" And I said, "Actually, no, I feel really strange." So they called another nurse over, and she asked me a few questions and said, "We just want to keep you a bit longer." I was already staying longer because I've had an anaphylactic reaction to a peanut. So I was already staying the extended time, but then they asked me to stay for a bit longer. So then
they knew that when they put this injection into you, they knew that you'd already had anaphylaxis.
Correct, yeah.
They show concern about that because that's definitely, can we say, counterintuitive to give this when someone's prone to anaphylaxis. Did they show?
Well, they asked just before they were about to put it in. They said, "So neither of you have had anaphylaxis, have you?" And I said, "I have." And they went, Oh, well, you'll need to wait an extra 20 minutes just to keep an eye on you. So,
that was the due diligence. That was it.
Yeah.
So
then the 40 minutes passed, and they came back and they said, "Are you okay now?" And I said, "No, I'm exactly the same as I was when you first started talking to me." And so they actually sent me home, and they said, "If you get worse, what will you do?" I said, "Well, if I get worse, I'll go to the hospital." So we went home. I'm really thankful that I had Shane with me, because if I'd gone there on my own, there's no way I would have been able to drive. I felt so drunk. I felt like I'd had a really hard night on the Terps. So then we got home, and my husband and my children kept asking me if I was all right. And I'm like, "I don't feel right." And then I started shaking. And this was probably about an hour after. Started shaking. I started vomiting. And I was mixing all my words up. I knew what I wanted to say in my head, but it wasn't coming out that way when I was talking. And I had my injection on my left side, and then my lips went numb from there over. And I was like, "This isn't right." So we got in the car and we went down to the hospital. We're only about a 5-minute drive from the hospital, so it was quicker than waiting for an ambulance.
Can I just clarify something, Rachelle? When you said you felt drunk, you hadn't been drinking. I have to do all the questions. You hadn't had anything that would have affected you in that way. And you said you felt drunk. Are you describing there a dizziness?
It's like being dizzy, but it's like wavy. That's how I felt. This is what my world felt like, was a real wavy kind of feel. Which I was later to find out is actually how people with vertigo feel. Rather than dizzy where you're going round and around, you kind of feel like you're wavy. So then by the time we got to the hospital and got in, my whole left side was numb. So they whisked me straight through, and they did all kinds of testing, MRIs, CT scans, X-rays. They hooked me up for the night to ICU. They monitored my heart for the night. And then they did all kinds of bloods. And the next day they said, "We've come to the conclusion that it's a serious adverse reaction to the vaccine." And I'm one of the lucky ones. I actually have it written on my discharge notes that's what it was. So
I was going to say that the joy of hearing that you had some professional help, for me, is very blurred by the number of people I've interviewed who would have longed for that sort of professional nursing and medical care in our New Zealand hospitals. The number of people who've had it belittled, dismissed, demeaned, told it's nothing, and then on the notes it's not acknowledged as a jab reaction. So let's hear, finally, this is the first interview where I can salute the hospital, which hospital? It's the Southland DHB, but which one?
It is. However, I wouldn't be saluting them because from there on out, I had the same experience as everybody else. So there were doctors there that were saying this is not the vaccine. But I'm like, there's no way it can't be the vaccine. I said it was instant as soon as it went in my arm. So when I went home, I went back to hospital twice more in the next 2 weeks by ambulance.
Before we talk about that, I just want to be really clear. So from the moment you got to the hospital, as the patient, you were crisply clear that this was linked to the jab, and you were not going to put up with the nonsense of being told it wasn't. You were not letting them do that.
And I have stood my ground on that all throughout this whole process. Yeah.
I point that out, Rachelle, because I think that is enormously potentially helpful for other Kiwis who turn up at hospitals or at their doctors and are belittled and demeaned and told that it's not. You stood your ground and they listened. So it's up to the patient now. I mean, this is reprehensible behaviour by the doctors, but if this is what it is right now, we have to deal with it as it is. You stand your ground and you tell your truth over and over. Is that what happened? And I do think too that, and I know because different ones in the hospital have told me that they're gagged, that they're only allowed to say what they've been told to say or they can lose their jobs. I also know that they've received emails with this as written, and I actually have friends that are in the medical profession, so they've told us the same thing. And there's been several instances when I've been in the hospital and the doctors have gone to say something and they've looked around them to see who's listening, and then they quietly tell me what they want to tell me. So they are covering their butts so that they don't have things happen to them. Yeah. What a bunch of lily-livered cowards. I cannot forgive that. They are professionals and they have to go home and look themselves in the mirror and say, I am doing this betrayal of Kiwis to save my own job. That is absolute cowardice. I can't believe Kiwis are doing that. However, that's an aside. So you were saying to me that you went home after that first hospital visit. You did have it acknowledged on the discharge notes. What were the next few days like? Because had they suspected a stroke to put you onto all the machinery?
They did. Yep. Yes. When I arrived and presented at the ED desk, they whipped me straight through because they thought that's what was happening. They thought it was a stroke. So then they just sent me home and said, take paracetamol and ibuprofen, and that was it. So over the next wee while before I went back to the hospital, I just felt so bad. My whole world was spinning, really sore head. I didn't have the sore head when I was in the hospital. That came a couple of days after the jab. And so the first trip back to the hospital, I was having trouble with my breathing. And so they took me back. They took me through the ambulance entranceway. But when they went in, the guy was talking to the lady behind the desk, but he wasn't presenting the information how I'd shared it to him.
The guy being the ambulance driver?
Correct. So they were sharing it. They were omitting things. So what they did with me then was they moved me out.
What were they omitting, Rachelle? What had you told the ambulance driver that was left out?
So just all the little things like that I'd had the first reaction, and he didn't share any of that. He just said, she had a reaction to the jab. Didn't share that I'd gone numb and that I was mixing my words up, because by then I was still doing that. Or things like that. It was just presented as somebody. I kind of felt like I was being presented as somebody who's a hypochondriac. We're just humouring her, kind of thing. And
the ambulance driver.
Yeah.
Was Shane, your husband, with you? Was he able to defend you and look after you?
So that time he was actually at work. So I went in the ambulance. So it was just me in that instance. And they actually, rather than taking me through into the hospital, they actually put me out in the ED emergency waiting room. And I sat there for probably 6 hours. And there was lots of people coming and going. And when somebody came in with a fungus infection in between their toes that they thought was getting worse and they got seen before me, it made me go, okay, we're actually getting put way down the pecking order. If they hear that you've got an injury to the vaccine, they don't want to deal with it. And when I went in that time, the doctor said to me, look, we actually just don't know what to do with all you vaccine injured people. We have no idea. And they gave me, because that particular one, I was having trouble breathing and my head felt like it was going to explode. It was so sore. And they gave me several different types of drugs to try and stop it. And they said, oh, well, that's all we can do for you. And they discharged me. So there was no more.
This is just extraordinary that this is going on, and doctors are speaking like this, fearfully, hiding things, not looking after our patients, not looking after the vaccine injured, who've done this at the government's request, and then saying, we don't know what to do with you, and not speaking up. Why are they not contacting? Would any doctors who are watching this please contact me urgently, and I will do urgent priority interviews with you? Why are we, the public, not hearing from the doctors that they are not able to cope? Because if we heard from you, this rollout would stop.
Yeah.
This is just shocking, Rachelle.
Yeah, it is. And then
what would you say to a doctor who said that to you, we don't know what to do with you? What would you say to them?
I was kind of shocked, actually. And because I was feeling so unwell, I probably didn't react in the way that I would possibly normally react by questioning that. So I think with that particular doctor, because I've seen so many, I think with that particular doctor, I said to them, so you've seen lots of cases then? And they went, no, we haven't. No. I was like, interesting. So then the third time when I went back by ambulance, again, all the way to the hospital, they were like, oh, well, we think this could be anxiety. It is not anxiety. I said, this has never come right from when I got jabbed. And so they doubted me the whole way to the hospital. And again, I was put out into the waiting room out in the ED and spent hours out there waiting to be taken in. And when I got in, I got a doctor who he actually listened. And he said, oh, we've run all these tests. We did the MRI back when you first came in, so it's not a clot in your brain. And so I questioned and I said, well, how do you know that there hasn't been one that's developed since then? And he was like, no, it's not. And so I'd been told by a medical friend to ask for the D-dimer test. And so I asked for that. And he was like, no, I don't think we need to do that. And then he was kind of giving me the bum's rush to move me out. And I said, I'm actually not going anywhere. I said, this has been going on now for, I think by that stage it was 3 weeks. I said, I'm not right. There is something not right. And I said, neurologically, it's done something to me. I said, I need you to do these tests and I'm not leaving here until you do. So
excellent woman. Excellent response. What a wonderful woman you are.
So he went away and talked to his boss and he came back and he said, look, and his whole demeanour changed. Prior to that, I was just a number. He was trying to get me out. But then his whole demeanour changed and he spent quite a long time sitting and talking with me about various things. And so he did all the tests. I had more x-rays done. I had the D-dimer done. I had all kinds of things done. And
Can I, that's really wonderful the way you're describing all this. The D-dimer, for people who are not aware, should be requested by everybody. What does it show, the D-dimer test?
So it shows if you've got blood clots happening anywhere in your body or starting to develop in your body. So I was really lucky. It came back and said that there wasn't. And it still has room for error that test, and he did explain that all to me. Error in the way that sometimes it can show that there's a slight, but it might not be. But mine showed nothing. So I was like, well, that's great. I said, however, that still doesn't help me. But it was great for my peace of mind to know that I wasn't having a clot developing somewhere that was causing this to happen. So I then went home from there with that, and I was like, okay, well, this is actually getting me nowhere. I'd spoken to my own doctor. He prescribed me with some vertigo pills, which did absolutely nothing. And so I was like, I'm not going to get any help from the medical profession. I've realised that now. And a friend put me in touch with a naturopath. So I started seeing her. I did an ozone treatment to oxidize my blood, and she's got me on a variety of different pills that have helped with the inflammation inside my body.
Could you name some of those, Rachelle? There is so much good stuff in your answers. There's so much that would help so many other Kiwis. I'm so grateful to you for your sharing. So what are some of the things she's got you on? Because ozone does oxygenate the blood for sure.
Yes, yeah. So I don't know their official big long names because they've all got them, but the ones that I'm taking are called GFEs and GFGs. So if anybody wants to know that sort of stuff, just speak to the naturopath. They'll know exactly what they're talking about.
It sounds as if you've got a good naturopath, and I'm going to ask you if you would mind giving us her details, if she's okay with that, and we can add that below this interview, and people could contact her from around New Zealand if they need help.
Okay. I'll ask her and get her permission. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. And so then I also
felt with those things, with taking these different protocols.
What was that? Sorry.
How have you felt with doing the ozone and these other pills? Have you noticed a difference?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I credit them with how well I feel now. I'm not right. I'm still not right. But overall, as a whole, I am much, much more improved. I lived with vertigo all day, every day for probably 4 months, just short of 4 months. And it's lessened and lessened. But I have noticed that my symptoms flare up and get worse when I have my period. So it's definitely linked to your cycle. My head feels like it's going to explode when that's coming up and during. And my vertigo goes really bad. I've also noticed, now that I'm a lot better, I've also noticed that when I'm around vaccinated people, especially freshly vaccinated people, my vertigo starts to flare up again, and I feel really, really yucky. So there's definitely something happening there with shedding as well. But I also
shedding, Rachelle. Have you researched that?
Not in a great depth. I have read a little bit about it. I kind of was like, I don't really know how accurate that is, but I'm beginning to think that that is actually something that's happening. I definitely do feel like a lot of my workmates, I knew when they got vaccinated, and it would be the next day or the day after I'd start to feel really yucky at the end of the day after being around them. So I definitely think it is a thing.
It's certainly something a lot of people are researching, and in all of these areas, Kiwis now have to take responsibility and start to research for themselves.
Yeah, definitely.
Stuff that's online. People write it off, but we had Dr. Guy Hatchard, the PhD scientist, who's been advising somebody on the SCIG committee which advises the government, until he realised that he felt that it was corrupted. But he is somebody who in an interview with me said there is enormous potential to find very good quality material online. You have to sift through it, but if you do it intelligently and you share it with friends and you discuss, you can find very good stuff. So yes, there are good articles there about shedding.
Yeah.
And so what else have you found since you've been doing these other treatments?
So I very, very rarely have massages, but one day I decided that I would book in to my lovely lady that does my massages, and just to try and help me feel a bit better because I was feeling so grotty. And I mentioned to her that I have a lot of pain right up the top of my spine into my skull. And she said, oh, that's interesting. So she went into that area and she said, oh, my gosh, you have got so much inflammation in there. And so she worked on it. It was so painful. Everybody says, oh, you're going for a massage. And I'm like, yeah, it's really painful. So I've had her work on me, and it's called the occipital point. And so she has worked on that every week since probably the start of September. And she said as the time's gone on, she's really noticed a difference in the density of it. She said it was so dense at the start she couldn't really even get her fingers into it, but it's loosened up. And so I think a combination of that and the naturopaths things have definitely helped. I've also noticed that if I have a week where I'm feeling grotty and I don't get out and go for walks, I actually feel worse. So if I go for a walk, it's obviously moving things around and endorphins and everything, I guess, too. I definitely feel better when I've been walking. And it wasn't until I got to a certain point where I had a really bad day and I was like, actually, do you know what? I haven't had vertigo yesterday. I was like, my gosh, I haven't had vertigo. And I hadn't noticed.
What was your health like before this?
Good. It was fine. Yeah. I mean, I have slight asthma, but it's under control and I never have any issues with that.
Did you have any of these symptoms, the vertigos, anything? No. That is I think you call it the occiput or the occiput. That is where all of the nerves come up from the spinal column right through the head. So having to work on there must be really helping your head. That's terrific.
Yeah, definitely is. And
And what about your personal life? How has that been affected? You were a teacher, I understand?
Yes, I was a teacher actually, technically I still am a teacher, but because they're working through the paperwork side of things with terminating me. But because I've had one jab, I could carry on working until the 1st of January. So, and obviously I'm a relief teacher, so I worked pretty much every day at one place. And so just before Christmas was my last day. But so I actually went down the line of when they had that week where we were allowed to get exemptions, I got an exemption because the very last doctor, the doctor that took all that time to talk to me, he said to me, have you had the second jab? And I said, no, I haven't. The very first doctor I saw said as I was leaving the hospital, you'll be all right to have your second jab. And I went, what? And so
that was a visit where they were testing you to see if you'd had a stroke.
Yes.
And that visit, he still was cavalier enough to say, go and have the second.
Yeah.
I want to start a role of dishonour of the doctors who are doing this irresponsible medical non-help to our citizens. Yeah. If you could get his name, I'd like to put his name on that. That is utterly irresponsible. So have you got his name?
I've got all the names because I requested my notes, which was really, really interesting. Things that they discussed with me that they never put on the notes, things that they said that they'd done and they did not do was really, really interesting.
Give me some examples of that, things they discussed that they didn't put on the notes.
So things like the doctor that took all that time to talk to me, he said, now I think you've actually got a chronic condition. He went away and wrote on his notes that he thinks I have anxiety. So he didn't write down the chronic condition. He wrote down that he thinks I have anxiety. And I don't have anxiety. I've never had anxiety in my whole entire life. Maybe this is causing me anxiety, but I've never had anxiety.
Well, I would like to get their names after this interview, and we are going to start that role of dishonour and obviously check in with you on all of the facts before we put their names up. But if they check out as facts and they go back to those notes, we can do that. And I think doctors need to start really looking to their laurels. This is a period of great shame for our medical fraternity in New Zealand. There are some brave ones who've spoken out, but the majority seem to be utterly betraying Kiwis.
Yeah.
So when you had to finish up at work, did you get a proper farewell? Did people acknowledge what you've gone through? What was it like after how many years of service have you done?
Can I come back to that? I just wanted to say the doctor that I saw that spent a lot of time with me, I said to him when he asked me if I'd had the second jab, I said, no, I hadn't. And I told him what the first doctor had said. And I looked him in the eye and I said, what would you tell me? He looked around to see who was watching and he said, I think if you have the second jab, it could kill you. And none of that is written on my notes, none of that. So, yeah. So that's when I went down the exemption line and my own doctor gave me the exemption and then old Bloomfield retracted them all. So then he applied for me to get one through Bloomfield, but he is not approving anybody's. He's just telling everybody that you can have it in the hospital and we'll have resus carts beside you to, assist you. So
I saw Ashley Bloomfield's Christmas Day post online and it was so disgusting. This happy family looking joyful and no worries at all. And he is getting the nickname Doomfield because
that's what I call him. I found it very hard to call him Bloomfield.
he's dooming good, honourable Kiwis to terrible while he looks after him.
Yeah.
What do you think of him, Rachelle? What would you say to him?
I think that he's not a real doctor. And if somebody was telling me the other day that he's been a doctor in the past, but I don't know if he's actually been a real doctor. He's ignoring all the real doctors who are giving their recommendations. When you've got a doctor who tells you, a real doctor that tells you that if you have the second jab, it could kill you, and then he turns around and tells you that it's okay, you've got to wonder what the agenda is behind everything that they're saying. They're pushing this on people that it will probably kill. And there's no long and short about that. So as a result of that, we have changed how we are doing our life. We could see what was coming. My husband has chosen not to have the second one either, especially after how long I've reacted. And he can see the lack of help or support. Q Hospital put through that to ACC that I had a headache, so they declined my thing. They didn't put any of the stuff about going numb and that's a fight I'm going to fight now that I've got no job. I have time to fight things like that. So that's something that I will be looking into now. But so we could see what was coming. So we actually put our house on the market and we sold it. We own an 11-metre house bus. So we have moved into that, put all our stuff in a container, and we're just going to buy a bit of land and park up on that, build a little bit of something and have no mortgage and have money left to live until hopefully this chaos that has been created in our country is over, really.
Chaos created by Doomfield, but also by
Jefferson.
the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
What would you say? I'm asking everybody, all the Kiwis I'm interviewing now, what's your message if it was Jacinda sitting here and not me? What would you say to the Prime Minister?
How would you feel if this was your daughter that was being treated like this? She's coming after her kids now. So, yeah, that would be my thing to her. And yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of things I could say, but you wouldn't want them on here.
I may well. What we have to be very brave and very, very honest in order for this to stop. So we have to, all of us come together and all of us support each other speaking our truths now, which is what I'm trying to do, because the mainstream media is not giving both sides what's going on. In fact, it's silencing a huge proportion of Kiwi voice. Your view, because you're very direct, what's your view of our mainstream media at the moment?
Oh, they're just lies. Everything they say is lies. I haven't watched the news for a very long time. We watched it a while ago and we spent the whole time yelling at the TV. You can see why there's a majority of people who are being sucked into what is being shared, because there's all this fear-mongering and propaganda that's being thrown at them. But they just need to look a little bit outside of the square, go away from mainstream media. We're not getting any information in New Zealand about what's going on overseas. If people actually just looked a little bit at what's happening overseas, they'd see things like Omicron is now being classed as like a flu. It's not a big, bad, major thing, but whereas our mainstream media is portraying it as something that's going to kill us all and we're all going to be in trouble if we get it. And there's.
You're clearly very onto it. We're going to do some pieces on that. Omicron is absolutely minor. It may be highly infectious, like a cold, like a sniffle, like a cold, but it's very, very benign. It's very benign, and it's easy for a healthy body to throw off. So such misinformation, as you say, fear mongering. I interviewed someone the other day who called it fear porn. They seem to enjoy, get high on this. I want to get back to your life now. You do feel, and you mentioned this earlier, you felt you've suffered some neurological damage. Are you feeling that there's some healing around that?
There's a little bit. I've always prided myself on being a very, very good speller, and I guess that comes with being a teacher too. But my spelling was shocking, and people would get texts from me, and they're like, "Man, we can tell you're not right because you're making spelling mistakes." So that has improved. I do still make mistakes with that. My biggest thing is I forget things a lot, and I might be halfway through a sentence and I will go, what was I actually talking about? And it may come back to me and it may not. And I know a lot of people say, oh, this is age. You have this when you go into a room and you're going to get something and you forget. Yes, I already had a bit of that, but not to this degree. It's incredibly frustrating, and that's probably one of the things that I find the most frustrating is that for a long time I had brain fog. I felt like I was in another body. It was just really horrible, and I carried on working, and I would come home from work and I would lie down and I would sleep for hours. My children would prepare tea and they would do the housework. They did everything because all I could do was function at work and then come home and sleep. There was a lot of tiredness. There's a lot of things. I'm just having, there's things like I was unsteady on my feet sometimes. I had a lot of hot sweats, especially at night time. I'm so pleased that they've gone now because that was really annoying. Tinnitus, I get that a bit. It comes and goes.
Has anything helped that? Has anything lessened that? Because there's someone I'm talking to tomorrow who's got such severe tinnitus that they're almost suicidal, and we were texting them last night, and that's definitely linked to his jab.
Yeah, I think because mine is really spasmodic, it just kind of comes and goes. To me, I've got bigger things that I had wrong with me that probably took more of my attention. I think that overall, everything that I'm doing has potentially helped all of the symptoms. I had it was about a week in, I had a pain appear on my left hip. It felt almost like all my nerve endings were exposed, and it stayed on top of the skin, and then that pain went and it went deep inside. My doctor thought perhaps it was turning into shingles, but it actually went away. So it never got diagnosed as shingles, but it was so painful. And I've actually spoken to other people that have had odd bumps that have appeared on their legs as well that have had the same sort of thing. So it's, something's happening there. But all of these things overall are improving. I definitely have days that aren't good, but I'll take having some days better than not, because when it originally happened, we didn't know what was going to happen to me. We were concerned that maybe I'm not even going to make it through this. And once we had done a lot more reading and been tapped into a lot of groups and things, we became very aware of lots of people that have had this. We didn't get that information before we had our jab. Where was our informed consent? We didn't have that information.
That's a very good point. It can only be informed if you have the information, and many Kiwis have been jabbed without it. Would you be okay if people linked in with you on Facebook to get some of those sites and groups if they're injured? Would you be able to? Would you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
Is that just under the name Rachelle Deans?
Yep.
Brilliant. That's wonderful. And I would actually like to talk to your naturopath, because I think on the health side of the equation, that would be a terrifically inspiring possibility for Kiwis as well, and could really help. So if you wouldn't mind asking her if we could put her name underneath and if she'd be open to an interview. Rachelle, your spirit is so strong. It is so strong and resilient and robust. I think, firstly, deep thanks for coming on today. You know, a great sympathy for what you're going through. But I think this interview will have helped so many other Kiwis who watch this right through, who need help with injuries. And I love the way you just seem indomitable. You just feel as if you're going to come through this. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm happy to get the information out there. My story has been shared far and wide by my friends because I think it needs to be out there. Everybody needs to hear these kind of stories. They need to know what they're going into. Yeah.
I'd love you to share that as well. If you've put it on a clip, we can put that underneath. And finally, Rachelle, for the costs of the naturopath and the massage, I imagine some money would be really helpful for you. Would you be willing for us to put your bank account? I ask everybody this. We can put your bank account details at the end of this. And if anybody would like to donate to help a fellow Kiwi who's going through this, they can put some money in your account if you'd like that.
That's very kind. But I do think... it has cost me thousands, but there's probably people out there that could benefit from it more, that are still really in the throes of it. If people want to give money, then they could do that to others that are right in the thick of it, really real big thick of it at the moment, I think.
We're a really fine race of people. You have no idea how many Kiwis I offer that to who say, think about the others first.
Yeah.
And you're one of them. I would love to put that on, and if you feel you have extra money, I'm sure that you can contact me and say, look, we had a whole lot of money come in that might help this other person, or you might see another interview and you can donate it on if you don't feel you need it. But I just think there will be people who want to help you. If you're open to that, we can add it. Have a think about it, Rachelle.
I will do. Thank you.
Thank you for talking to us, and keep in touch with us. We'd love to hear how you go with using these alternative treatments that could really help others as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachelle.
See ya.